I would like to go over the assignment. I am looking at a Microsoft Word document, and I want to demonstrate something. Supposing I wanted to place some kind of color on this word HTML5. Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to select it, and then I go up to my toolbar, and I can apply a color. The point is that I need to indicate to Microsoft Word, what do I want to format? And how do we do that? We select it. So I can select this and I can make it italic. That is what we will do in CSS. The only difference is we don't have a toolbar and we're not using our cursor. So we learn how to tell the browser where in the document we want to apply the styles by using selectors. So I am looking at the last assignment because you will be building upon this last assignment. We started learning how to use CSS. Notice we have applied some styles, mainly color, and also our basic body styles. So if you look at the source code, we are using element selectors. We have the opening and closing style tag inside the head section, and we are using element selectors. I also have a grouping selector, and I also have a descendant selector. You may not have a descendant selector depending on how you styled your document. So when I apply a style to, say, an H2 element, that will apply the style to every H2 element in that document. Supposing I only wanted to apply it to certain H2 elements, that is where we need to create a selector telling the browser exactly what we want to select so that we can apply the styles. This is the final version of the web page that you will be creating. Notice that our heading level 1 element is now centered. We have a text shadow on it. We also have some letter spacing. Notice that the image is also centered along with the H1 element. Notice that I have configured my navigation to look a lot more like navigation. I have removed the underline. I have removed the bullets. Rather than lining up vertically, they are now lining up horizontally. I also have added some word spaces to the two H2 elements that contain 2 words. I have given you specific instructions in the assignment handout how to go about doing this so that you will learn. This is the code that I have. Your code could be a little bit different. I have the header element, and inside the header element, I have an H1 element and the nav element, which contains the UL for navigation. We're going to work with the H1 element. We're going to style the text and center it. I'm going to do that by using an ID selector. I will name this selector Head1. So I need to type in the ID attribute and the value of Head1. So that is my ID, and it applies to the H1 element. Now I will create a selector for that. While you can place your style rules anywhere, I try to organize them logically. So I will place my ID underneath my H1 element. Now I will apply the text shadow property, and you can use whatever values and colors you would like. Now I'm going to save this and I'm going to test it. It is a good idea to always save your code and then test it as soon as you add something new to make sure it's working right. If it's not working right, then you realize where the error is right away. If you sit down and code for a half an hour and nothing looks right, it's really hard to find your mistakes. Now you can see that I have the text shadow, and you can adjust that however you like. I will now apply the letter spacing property, and I will center that H1 content. Because I am applying the text align property to the H1, the text and the image inside this element will be centered. Technically, I'm not centering the H1, I'm centering what's inside the H1. So I have now applied two other styles to my H1 ID. Remember, the ID is represented by the hash sign in front of the value. In CSS, the ID attribute is unique, meaning we can only use that value head 1 once in the document, even though it may work if you do it in multiple times. It is not correct. Should you wish to apply the same style in multiple locations, you will use a class. So if I wanted to apply a style to two H2 elements and not to every H2 element, I can do that using a class. That is the class attribute. This attribute only exists for CSS, as does the ID attribute. So now I have class equals word space inside both of my H2 elements. Now I will create the CSS select. The class selector is preceded by a period. The ID selector is preceded by a pound or a hash sign. So when you see these characters in your CSS selectors, you know that they refer to an attribute inside your HTML code. So I have applied the word spacing style to this class. Now I will save my document and test it. Not only can you see that my word spacing is working, we also can see that our centering is working. The last thing that you will do for this assignment is to style the navigation. Some of the styles that I am using are not in this chapter. However, I will explain them in the handout. We want to remove the underline from all of our hyperlinks. Because we want to remove them from every hyperlink in the document, we can just use the A element as a selector. This is the element selector. So I am applying the text decoration property to the value of none. I would like to point out one thing. Many CSS properties have two words, some three. They are always hyphenated. Now I test, and you can see that the hyperlink underline is no longer there. Next, we will get rid of those bullet markers. So let's look at our navigation section. We are using the nav element, and inside we have our UL element, and we have our LI elements. You can apply the property either to the UL or the LI. I will apply the list style type property with the value of none to the LI. Notice that I am using a descendant selector. I am using that for a reason. There will only be one nav element in your document. There could be other list items somewhere else. This way we can narrow down to which LIs the style will be applied. This is called a descendant selector, and it is based on the parent-child relationship of the elements in the HTML document. Now we have removed the bullet markers from our LI items. However, this does not look like navigation. By default, the LI items stack vertically because they are block elements. We will apply a CSS style to make them line up in a horizontal direction so that they look more like navigation. We will also add a background color. So here I have applied the display property. So I'm turning my block element into an inline element that also has block characteristics, and I'm setting a background color. These are being applied to the LI element that is inside the nav element. This is a descendant selector. So here we see the final result of our navigation. So the goal of this assignment, in addition to applying the CSS properties, is to learn how to use the various CSS selectors.